Michele Roberts, prior to her retirement in January 2022, Ms. Roberts had since 2014 served as the executive director of the National Basketball Players Association. In that role, she was tasked with working on behalf of the NBA players to ensure their rights are protected and they were fairly compensated for the value they bring to the sport and their impact on the community. Prior to joining the NBPA, she was an esteemed trial lawyer with Skadden, Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom. Her practice focused on complex civil and white-collar criminal litigation before state and federal courts and in administrative proceedings. Mrs. Roberts has tried more than 150 cases to jury verdicts, representing clients in a wide variety of areas, including products, liability, white-collar, racketeering, securities, regulation violations, I can't read that. What does that say? 7 issues and premises liability. I apologize. 1 second.
So you got it.
No, my eyes, I'm sorry, my screen is messing. She is a top-ranked attorney who has received numerous accolades from the Chambers Global, Chambers USA, and Benchmark Litigation, among other notable publications. Ms. Roberts is a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers. She worked for 8 years in office of the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia, where she was named Chief Trial. I apologize, my screen is moving again. She was named Chief of the Trial Division. Ms. Roberts is a frequent lecturer and presenter to both the bench and the bar on a variety of topics related to litigation and trial practice. She taught trial advocacy as an adjunct member of the faculty at Harvard Law School and as an instructor with the National Institute of Trial Advocacy. Ms. Roberts currently serves as the board of Cresco Labs, the Marshall Project, the Bronx Defenders, and Wesleyan University, her alma mater. And without further ado, we have Miss Michele Roberts.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me well enough?
Yep. Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I'll just jump right in if you want. And so what's my story? As you mentioned, I was the executive director of the National Basketball Players Association. I'm happy to report that I'm happily retired. I love the job, but retirement is really pretty cool. So I'm having a good time doing that. But let me tell you how it was I even got into this basketball space at all. Surprising to many people, I never, ever, ever planned to be involved in sports. I have never played. I have no athletic ability. I've always loved basketball because I grew up in New York City and I lived in the projects. And if you live in the Bronx and the housing projects of New York City, you love basketball. You have no choice. That's what everybody does. And so I always loved the game, but it was never my plan to be engaged in the world of sports at all. What I wanted to do, and you now know that because you've heard my resume, what I always wanted to do was be a lawyer, and I wanted to be a trial lawyer. But I really wanted to be not simply a trial lawyer, but a public defender. Again, I grew up in the projects, meaning we were poor. And I felt very strongly about becoming a lawyer, a very good lawyer to represent poor people, because I could see the quality of representation that poor people were getting. So sports was not on my mind. I mean, I couldn't for many, many years even afford to attend an NBA game because you know what those ticket prices look like. As I got older, I did ultimately find myself able to afford to go to games, and I was a season ticket holder. I was not living in New York at the time. I was living in Washington, D.C., so my team went from the Knicks to the Wizards. Left the public defender service after a while, decided to have my own practice, and I did that for a number of years. Then decided I wanted to work for one of these large law firms because I was becoming more interested in more complicated cases. I had some nieces I needed to get through college, and I was happily trying large commercial cases for the preceding 8 or 10 years, just traveling around the country trying cases. Fairly content, still living in DC. My cases would last typically 2 or 3 months, right? And this is what happened. One of the cases that I was scheduled to be in trial in for several months settled, meaning that the parties decided, okay, we'll just deal with this and not have to go in front of a jury. which left a gap of about 2 or 3 months in my calendar. When I'm not in trial or otherwise preparing for trial, I have more downtime. So I had an opportunity to read the sports section, something I rarely did, and learned about the union for basketball players. I'm not kidding when I tell you, I didn't even know they had a union for basketball players, right? I mean, think about unions and think about plumbers, think about electricians. But I learned about this union, and I learned that the director of the union had just been fired by the players. So I thought, wow, it will take them 15 seconds to get someone else to take that job because it must be a really great job. Put it aside, got busy with some other things. Several months later, again, read the sports section and learned that the players had not yet identified or elected a new executive director. And it just hit me. Wonder what that job is really like. And that was the first time I thought about even engaging in sports as a career. So, thank God for the internet. I was able to do a lot of Googling and due diligence on what the job entails, some of the history of the union. And the more I learned about it, frankly, the more I wanted to do it. And the more I wanted to do it, the more I convinced myself that nobody could do it better than me. So I decided to go for it. In part because I was going to be interviewed by the players. I mean, I was interviewed by Steph Curry, Chris Paul, Andre Iguodala. I was hyped about the opportunity to meet these guys who I love because, again, I love basketball even though I couldn't play. And the good news is they hired me. So that's kind of how I got here. But I guess to the extent, and I'll stop, to the extent there are 2 or 3 things I would say about that is, number one, you don't have to be an athlete to be engaged in the world of sports. Obviously, if you have superior athletic skills, you can and you will and you should. But if you're like me and you couldn't bounce a ball to save your soul, but you're interested in sports, don't think that there's not a place for you. And actually, Mr. Curtis said it well just a few minutes ago. The ecosystem of sports is incredibly vast. If you have an interest in marketing, you have an interest in photography, you have an interest in sports writing, you have an interest in financial development, anything that you're interested in, there's probably a place for you in the world of sports if you want to go into the world of sports. So don't be discouraged because you can't hoop. Second thing I would say is particularly women, don't assume that you're not going to be welcome in the world of sports because you assume it's completely male dominated. It is male dominated, but it's not male exclusive. And there are lots of women that are doing some really very important and quality stuff in the world of sports. So don't think, oh, well, they'll never give me a shot because I'm a girl. They will, and you get in that room and you show them how good you are. And then the third thing I would say is, even if you don't get involved in sports tomorrow, look, I'm not young. I didn't get involved in sports until 10 years ago. And so if you're not there tomorrow and you're not there 5 years from now, but you still harbor an interest, don't give up. There's going to be space for you. I don't regret having done it. I never thought I would do it, but I can't be happier that case settled, because if it hadn't settled, I'd have been immersed in trial for months and would never have focused on it. That's kind of my story.